Zechariah chapter 2. And I lifted my eyes and looked and saw a man with a measuring line in his hand. And I said, "Where are you going?" And he said to me, "To measure Jerusalem, to see what is its width and its length." And see, the messenger who was speaking to me was going out, and another messenger was coming out to meet him. And he said to me, "Run, speak to this young man, saying, Jerusalem is to remain unwalled because of the many men and livestock in it. For I myself am to her, declares Yahweh, a wall of fire all around, and for a steam I am in her midst. Oh, and flee from the land of the north, declares Yahweh, for I have scattered you like the four winds of the heavens, declares Yahweh. O Zion, escape, you who dwell with the daughters of Babel. For thus said Yahweh of hosts, for the sake of esteem he sent me to the nations which plunder you. For he who touches you touches the apple of my eye. For look, I am waving my hand against them, and they shall become spoil for their servants. And you shall know that Yahweh of hosts has sent me. Sing and rejoice, O daughter of Zion, for look, I am coming, and shall dwell in your midst, declares Yahweh. And many nations shall be joined to Yahweh in that day, and they shall become my people, and I shall dwell in your midst, and you shall know that Yahweh of hosts has sent me to you. And Yahweh shall inherit Judah, his portion in the set-apart land, and he shall again choose Jerusalem. Hush, all flesh, before Yahweh, for he has roused himself out of his set-apart dwelling. Good morning, or evening, or whatever, twilight, whenever you're watching this. It's very early morning for me, because I woke up far before I was required to remove myself from my bed. And the Spirit said, "Go do Ezekiel chapter 2. And I said, "Okay, cool. Will we get to 3 today?" And the Spirit said, "Maybe not. You talk a lot." It's like, that's fair. Okay. So, if you haven't already read Zechariah 1, you should. Also, please remember, you need to be reading your Bible too. This is something we should be doing together. I want you to see all these things with your own eyeballs, okay? Don't take my word for it. I don't have a monopoly on the Holy Spirit or on an understanding of Scripture. I used to say all the time to you guys for years, for 7 years I've said on camera, I'm not your pastor, I'm your brother. I'm Brother Bear. Well, I can't say that anymore. Thanks, PJ. So, what is a pastor? Jeremiah 3:15. And I, Yahweh, shall raise up over you shepherds, pastors, Ra'ah, that shall, after my own heart, that shall feed you with knowledge and understanding. Okay. So, a shepherd, now I understand why Yah made me get sheep. A shepherd, after Yah's own heart, that will feed you with knowledge and understanding. Okay, cool. So let's see if we can do that, huh? And I, Zechariah, lifted up my eyes and looked. Okay, so whatever he's looking at is above him. Remember, angelic beings and Yahweh are larger than us. For the noobs, welcome noobs. You probably have not heard my testimony, but go search on the YouTube search bar, Bear Independent Testimony, and understand that this is going to sound weird, but it's true. There are layers to this onion that we call physical existence, and there are things that exist, and this is not hippy-dippy New Age BS. This is biblical. There are planes and realms of existence. You know, you can read the letters of the epistles of Paul in the New Testament, and I'm aware of a man who is gathered up to the third heaven. Which one's that one? Okay. The third one. Not very specifically the third one, not the 10th or the first. There are layers to this onion. Physical, ethereal, astral, spiritual, etc., etc. What we know as human beings, what we experience with our 5 sensors that we have, our eyeballs and our ears and our ability to taste and smell and touch, and our intuition, our knowing as well, touches scientifically about 1/1,000,000th of the known electromagnetic spectrum. And if you change the sensors, you change the inputs. And an example I like to use is night vision. If you use a PVS 14 or LLUL 21 or PVS 31s or whatever, you put some, or a thermal scope, okay? These are sensors, infrared sensors or heat detection sensors, kind of like Predator, that you don't have built in. But if you change the sensor, you can see something that wasn't there before. Okay. So, Yah gives everybody giftings, talents, delights. And one of the extra sensors he has given me is I have seen things since I was a little kid. Black things and white things, and not melanin, not skin tone. Soul disposition, black things and white things. Demons and angels. Angel, singular. Thousands of demons. And that one angel that I've seen is more powerful and beautiful than the thousands of demons I've seen combined. But that angel was tall. It was big. Like 12 to 15 feet tall. Super cool. And so when Zechariah says, and I lifted up my eyes and looked, and I saw a man with a measuring line in his hand. Zechariah could have been prostrate. He could have been down on the ground on his knees. You can read in the Bible, it says, and he and they did obeisance, like knees on the ground, forehead in the dirt, that kind of prayer. And that's amazing. If you haven't prayed like that recently, I would recommend it. So it could be that. Or it could be this man that he saw wasn't a man. Because, even if you read in Exodus, the second half of Exodus, the description of the tabernacle, the tent of appointment, the dwelling place, it's tall. To make room for Yahweh. Yah's tall. The boss is tall. And I said, where are you going? And he, the man, said, to measure Jerusalem. Now, this measuring line in the man's hand is reminiscent of Ezekiel 40 through 48. You see this measuring line. This is a common phraseology over and over again. The measuring line would be similar to saying, I saw a guy with a tool belt and a tape measure. Okay, indicator, probably going to build something. So the measuring line is, we're probably going to build something, but it's also equal weights and measures. Oftentimes, the measuring line, or the phrase the measuring line, is used in the sense that Yahweh is taking the measure of a man, a people group, a city. And I said, where are you going? And he said to me, to measure Jerusalem, to see what its width and what its length. Okay. So, physical measurements. How many people can we fit in there? And what does this indicate, right? Well, again, not just equal weights and measures. Almost undertones here, patterns of Sodom and Gomorrah. And Yahweh heard their cries and went down to see. Okay. But the opposite of Sodom and Gomorrah, they're measuring Jerusalem to see, can people fit in it? And the answer is, of course, it's a city. But what would that indicate to Zechariah, and then therefore to Zechariah's homies when he talks to him about it? Hey, they're measuring Jerusalem. I think we could put people in it again. See the symbology here? And see, the messenger who was speaking with me was going out. And another messenger, the man who's a messenger, the messenger that's a man. Okay, messenger in the ISR 2009 version, the scriptures is angel. Okay. And see, the messenger who was speaking to me was going out, and another messenger was coming out to meet him. And he said to him, run, speak to this young man, Zechariah, saying, Jerusalem is to remain unwalled because of the many men and livestock in it. Now, remember here, this is being written at the time of the return from the Babylonian captivity. Remember, we talked about Cyrus ends by decree the captivity in 538 BC. Zechariah is writing as a contemporary of Haggai, chapters 1 through 8 at approximately 520 BC, written by Zechariah himself, and then chapters 9 through 14, written likely by a student or apostle of Zechariah in 500-ish BC, about 20 years later. So this is during the very early stages of what is referred to as the Second Temple period, because the temple hasn't been rebuilt yet. And so Zechariah is prophesying to, again, contemporary of the prophet Haggai, prophesying to these exiles, saying, hey, we got to go home again. And that's pretty much the point of chapter 2. We got to go home again. And Dad says it's okay for us to go home again. I saw angels measuring Jerusalem. They said there's going to be so many men and livestock there, don't put a wall around it. Okay, well, that's not the current status in context of Jerusalem. The people have been exiled. All that were left were the remnants of the poor in the land. And poor, like, blessed are the poor in spirit. I had a brother ask me about this the other day. What does it mean to be poor in spirit? Poor is one of those words that doesn't necessarily have a monetary context. Poor can also be, and is often, translated as humble. Blessed are the humble in spirit. So the humble people of the land have remained. The remnant is humble. Interesting. But these exiles returning from Babylon were looking for encouragement to return from Babylon. Run, speak to this young man, saying, Jerusalem is to remain unwalled because of the many men and livestock in it. For I myself am to her, declares Yahweh. A wall of fire all around, and for steam I am in her midst. Oh, so Yah is returning to Jerusalem. Yah is going to put his blessing on it. Yah will be the wall and the protection to his people in Jerusalem. That should be encouraging. God himself is there. Yeah, we could probably go home. Oh, and flee from the... Oh, by the way. BT dubs. Flee from the land of the north. Come out of her, my people, declares Yahweh. For I have scattered you like the four winds of the heavens, declares Yahweh. O Zion, escape, you who dwell with the daughter of Babel. Get out of Babylon. Go back to Jerusalem. And this is literal. And there's foreshadowing here of Revelation 18 verse 4. But it's also figurative. O Zion, which is not, I don't know how many times we got to address this. Israel is a people group. Genesis 32. See my commentary in Zechariah chapter 1. Not a piece of land. Canaan is a piece of land, the promised land. So, O Zion, O Israel, O you, believer in Messiah, who's grafted in Ephesians chapter 2, Romans chapter 11, into the tree of life, Israel. Escape, you who dwell with the daughter of Babel. There's patterns, shadows, allusion to the story of Balaam and Balak, Numbers approximately 20 through 25, book of Numbers. The overarching story there with Balaam and Balak is that Israel, when Israel, the people group, is covered by the Most High, they cannot be cursed or defeated in battle. But they can be deluded through intermarriage with the heathen, because they will adopt ways that are against Yahweh. Which is why you see, do not be unequally yoked, right? So, O Zion, escape you who dwell with the daughter of Babel. Do not be unequally yoked. For thus said Yahweh of hosts, Yahweh Sabaoth. Remember that, the general speaking. For the sake of esteem, he sent me to the nations which plunder you. For he who touches you touches the apple of my eye. Saying, I love you, kid. I got you covered. No one's going to touch you. And if they do, they're touching the apple of my eye. It's almost like, hey, I love all my kids, but you're my favorite. Anybody that messes with you messes with me. Very reassuring. For look, I am waving my hand against them, and they shall become spoil for their servants, that anyone who touches you, Babylon. And you shall know that Yahweh of hosts has sent me. Now, almost speaking in the second/third personage here, for look, I am waving my hand, Yahweh of hosts, waving my hand against them, and they shall become spoil for their servants, and you shall know that Yahweh of hosts has sent me. Yahweh of hosts is talking about Yahweh sending himself. There's foreshadowing, allusion to Messiah here as a covering for Zion, Israel. Sing and rejoice, O daughter of Zion. For look, I am coming and shall dwell in your midst, declares Yahweh. All right, so we've talked about how prophecy has cycles and patterns, right? It's near-term prophetic and long-term prophetic. In the near-term prophetic, in 520 BC, when Zechariah is prophesying to these exiles here, look, I am coming and shall dwell in your midst. This is this call back to Jerusalem to come back under the covering of the Father, back into the promised land, and Yah himself shall be their covering, their protection. But it's also alluding to Messiah in the long-term, mid-term, and long-term prophetic, because Messiah, around, 30-ish AD, was in the land at the second temple period, that was rebuilt by Nehemiah and Ezra, etc., Zerubbabel, but shall be again in the land at the temple, the third temple, probably, going all the way back to 2 verse 1, that we see described with the measuring line in Ezekiel 40 through 48. So, for I am coming and shall dwell in your midst, declares Yahweh. Hosanna, Messiah is in the land. Yeah. And this verse 11, and many nations shall be joined to Yahweh in that day, and they shall become my people, and I shall dwell in your midst, and you shall know that I, Yahweh of hosts, has sent you. And Yahweh shall inherit Judah, his portion in the set-apart land, and he shall again choose Jerusalem. So in 11 and 12, we see this call for Judah to be inherited by Yah in the land, in the set-apart land, the Holy Land. The Holy Land is Canaan. Judah is 1/13 of Israel, a people group descended from Jacob, Jacob, who's renamed in Genesis 32, Israel. But many nations shall be joined to Yahweh in that day, and they shall become my people. Now, when Israel went out in the Exodus, the sages say, which is, beware the leaven of the Pharisees, be careful. Just because the sage said it doesn't mean that it's true. We'll just leave that there for now. The sages say that 82 other nations went out from Egypt with the Israelites and were present at Mount Sinai when Moshe received the covenant of the Torah from the Most High. So the nations being with Israel is not a new concept. It's why Yahweh rebukes Peter in Acts chapter 10, which is recounted in Acts chapter 11. Hey, do not call what I have set apart common or unclean. And that has nothing to do with food. It's all about people, because the nations have been participatory in these covenants with Elohim since jump. And so it's one of the stumbling blocks of today's modern era, where the Jews say they are God's chosen people. And that is true, but it's 1/13 true plus infinity true. Okay? They are God's chosen people. That is our elder brother Judah. But if I'm Ephraim, which there's at least supporting archaeology, history to prove that, cool, I'm God's chosen people too. And even if I'm not Manasseh, Zebulun, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Naphtali, Dan, etc., etc., if I'm not one of the natural branches, Romans 11, of the tree of life, and I'm grafted in by the blood of Messiah, Ephesians chapter 2, I'm still part of the family. I'm still one of these nations that's joined to Yahweh in that day. And so this is Second Temple period, and today, midterm prophetic, and end of an age, and end times, all wrapped up into one here. And so the idea that the nations, the Great Commission, therefore go forth and make believers out of all nations. The idea that the nations being joined to Yahweh is purely a New Testament mechanism and something that the Yehudim, the Jews, would rail against, is unbiblical, because this pattern has been established throughout this word that we've read together. And Yahweh shall inherit Judah, his portion in the set-apart land. Okay, well, who's Zechariah talking to? Who went into the Babylonian captivity? Judah did. The 10 northern tribes, the house of Israel, not to be confused with the nation of Israel. The house of Israel was exiled by the Assyrian Empire. The Assyrian Empire was replaced by the Babylonian Empire as the lone world superpower of the day. And when the Babylonians usurped the Assyrians, they took over the land holdings of the Assyrians and the Assyrian conquest of Canaan, the promised land, had ended right outside of on the doorstep of the house of Judah. And so now the Babylonians come in, they take over all the land that had been controlled by the Assyrians, that land that in part had been the house of Israel, the 10 northern tribes. They're now on the doorstep of Jerusalem. And so in the Babylonian captivity, as the Babylonians continue this conquest for land, they end up in Judea, the house of Judah, the territory. And so the Babylonians exile the Yehudim, the house of Judah. And so this is who Zechariah is saying returned from Babylon back to the promised land. It would make sense that he's talking to Judah because that's who was exiled in Babylon. Because the 10 northern tribes had been exiled, scattered to the four corners of the earth by the Assyrian Empire previously. And you can see that four corners, like verse 6, for I have scattered you like the four winds of the heavens. Okay. So yeah, it makes sense that Zechariah would be talking to Judah. And then verse 13, hush all flesh before Yahweh, for he has roused himself out of his set-apart dwelling. Everybody, shh. Yah is moving. He's come out of his set-apart dwelling. He's come out of the heavenlies. Yahweh is in the land to be a covering to you. That's amazing. Very encouraging. And so Zechariah chapter 2 is all this encouragement to, hey, return from this displacement, this exile into Babylon, and come back to the land, which is your portion, your inheritance. And Yah will cover you in the doing of this. In fact, he will be in the land. Which brings us to chapter 3, which is 10 verses long. We ought to be able to get 2 and 3 done in just a simple 1 hour Bible study of 23 verses. It's about par for the course for us. If you've ever midrashed with me or us in assembly, I think our current record was Matthew chapter 7 verses 21 through 24, 3.5 verses in midrash, 2 hours. Previously, we'd made it 7 verses in Matthew chapter 5 in 2 hours, 40 minutes. That was the record holder. There's a lot of meat in this word when you take the time to study it, to spend time with it. So, Zechariah chapter 3. And he, which he, not a capital he. So this he is referring back to this man / messenger, which is an angel. And he showed me Joshua, the high priest. Let me read all this and we'll come back for commentary. But understand, again, near-term prophetic and long-term prophetic. This whole Zechariah 3, the parallels here to Messiah, Yahushua, the high priest, are myriad. And he, this angel, showed me Joshua, the high priest, standing before the messenger of Yahweh, and Satan standing at his right hand to be an adversary to him. And Yahweh said to Satan, Yahweh rebuke you, Satan. Yahweh, who has chosen Jerusalem, rebuke you. Is this not a brand plucked from the fire? And Joshua was dressed in filthy garments and was standing before the messenger. And he answered and spoke to those who stood before him, saying, remove, this is Yahweh speaking, remove the filthy garments from him. And to him, to Joshua, he said, see, I have removed your guilt from you, and shall put costly robes on you. And I said, Zechariah said, Yahweh said, let them put a clean turban on his head. And they put a clean turban on his head, and they put garments on him, and the messengers of Yahweh stood by. And the messenger of Yahweh witnessed to Joshua, saying, thus said Yahweh of hosts, if you walk in my ways, and if you guard my duty, then you shall also rule my house, and guard my courts, and I shall give you access among these standing here. Now listen, Joshua the high priest, you and your companions who sit before you, for they are men of symbol. For look, I am bringing forth my servant, the branch. See the stone which I have put before Joshua. On one stone are 7 eyes. See, I am engraving its inscription, declares Yahweh of hosts, and I shall remove the guilt of the land in one day. In that day, declares Yahweh of hosts, you shall invite one another under the vine and under the fig tree. So what's happening here? Joshua, the high priest, there was a guy named Joshua in the Second Temple period who was the high priest. What's the point of having a temple if we don't have a high priest? Temple, priest, Levites. Which I can rant on this for an hour. But if the Yehudim rebuild the second temple, the third temple in our day, if they rebuild it, none of them are Levites. The high priest is in the lineage of who? Aaron, the brother of Moses. You'll remember in the wilderness in the book of Numbers, there's a time after the rebellion of Korah. Remember Korah? And the earth swallows up Korah and Dathan and Aviram, and because they rebelled against Moshe and Aaron. And so Yahweh tells Moshe, have a leader from each tribe take a staff, and whichever one buds, that's whom I choose to serve me in the priesthood. And Aaron's rod buds. It grows. It goes from a dead stick into a living tree, if you will. It buds, leaves and fruit and flowers on it, as a sign that Yahweh has chosen the house of Aaron of the tribe of Levi for the high priesthood. So even if in our age the Yehudim build a temple, none of them of the tribe of Judah, none of them are appointed to the priesthood. The priesthood belongs to this worldly priesthood, without delving into the order of Melchizedek, as first seen in the book of Genesis and then addressed by Shaul of Tarsus in the book of Hebrews, referring to Messiah. The order of Melchizedek, which predates the Levitical priestly system overseen by the high priest in the line of Aaron. The Yehudim, who don't believe in Messiah and therefore don't have access to the priesthood, the order of Melchizedek, are also not Levites. They're also not of the house of Levi. They're not of the line of Aaron. Now, arguments can be made that the house of Judah, not to be confused with the house of Israel, the 2 sticks, Ezekiel 37, the binding of the 2 branches, that the house of Judah, I know, it sounds complicated, and I apologize. I didn't make it this complicated, but it does show over the course of 3,500, 4,000 years how complicated men can make service to Elohim, when in fact it's very basic. But the house of Judah was comprised of the tribe of Judah, the tribe of Benjamin, and about 2/3 of the Levites. So one could argue that the Yehudim of today have absorbed Benjamin and Levi. Okay, but find me a high priest in the line of Aaron. Find me Levites for the temple service, because these are Levitical purviews. They're not the purview of the Yehudim. The Yehudim, Judah, was blessed with the kingship, not the priesthood. Okay? So, and Yahweh showed me Joshua the high priest, standing before the messenger of Yahweh. Now, the capital M messenger of Yahweh is Yeshua. Okay, but this is not a capitalized M here. But it's interesting. The messenger of Yahweh and Yahweh and the high priest Yahushua, Joshua, and Satan are all standing here together. Satan standing at his right hand to be an adversary to him. That's literally what Satan means. Adversary or accuser. So many people give Satan way too much credit. And Yahweh said to Satan, Yahweh rebuke you, Satan. Yahweh, who has chosen Jerusalem, rebuke you. So why would Satan be there? Well, this isn't the only time. Read the book of Job that we see Satan in the courts of Yahweh. That's super interesting. What's he doing? He's the adversary. He's the accuser. He's the prosecutor in the court of the Most High, if you will. We have the best defense attorney to ever exist, Messiah. There's a forcing factor, a mechanism here similar to when Shaul of Tarsus, the Apostle Paul, says, I knew not sin but by the law. Without an accuser to point out when you are falling flat on your face, would we know when we're falling flat on our face so that we could turn unto righteousness? So, as a forcing factor in the pursuit of Yahweh with free will, Satan serves a mechanism for us. I see that you're already awake. I am filming a Bible video. Okay, I love you. So, the enemy serves a forcing function for us in our free will to choose Yahweh, to be tempted by Satan, right? Away from righteousness. But look at how easily Yahweh rebukes Satan. Yahweh rebuke you, Satan. Okay, there's not a long, flowing, authoritative prayer here for driving away the devil. No, Yahweh rebuke you, Satan. Simple as that. And we are sons and daughters of the Most High, and we should exhibit the same confidence and authority, and I would submit brevity when dealing with the accuser. Oh, but Satan is witnessing against us, all these things that we've done wrong. Cool, do better. Do fewer things wrong. Shall I sin all the more so that grace may abound? No. Yah forbid. Okay. So Satan's up here tattling on Joshua the high priest, and Dad's like, got it. Now you can be quiet. You're right. You're right. He is a man. He has made mistakes. 100%. Now watch this though. And Joshua was dressed in filthy garments and was standing before the messenger. And he, Yahweh, answered and spoke to those who said to those who stood before him, saying, remove the filthy garments from him. Satan's like, look at him. He's covered in sin. He's covered in filth. And Yah's like, yeah, tracking, got it. Rebuke you, Satan. You can be quiet now. All right, guys, clean him up. It's not that Satan's wrong. It's that the accusations that Satan makes about us don't carry the weight that Satan would like them to. They do not in any way outrank the Most High and his judgment. And he goes, yeah, you're right. He is filthy. You know what we should do? Let's clean him up. That's a good idea. Not condemn him for his filth. Let's clean him up. You see the patterns and the cycles and the foreshadowing here. Now, how would Messiah be filthy in the presence of the Most High? He that knew no sin became sin for us. He took all of our transgression, all of our guilt, all of our shame upon himself. The filth, all of your filth, he took And Yah says, cool, clean them up. That's amazing. Because Yah says the same thing about you and about me. Yeah, you're right. He is a mess. He's a mess. Clean him up. That's my son. It's akin to the prodigal son who was wallowing with the pigs, filthy, and he returns home again. And what does dad say? I'll give you a new set of garments. Clean him up. Shalom, welcome, Mazel Tov. I'm so excited that my son is home. We're going to have a feast. Clean him up. Satan's going, he's dirty, he's filthy. Dad's like, yeah, I know. I got it. Thanks, you're right. Now you can be quiet. See, I have removed your guilt from you. That filth is gone. And shall put costly robes on you, the robes of the high priest. Costly robes on you. Also a symbol of status. And I said, let them put a clean turban on his head. Now remember, the high priest wears a turban. You could go back to the Old Testament, the Pentateuch, and read about the garments of the high priest, the garments of Aaron. You see a lot of that in the second half of Exodus in the preparation of the building of the tabernacle. And they put a clean turban on his head, and they put garments on him, and the messenger of Yahweh stood by. And the messenger of Yahweh said to Joshua, now, the angel of the Lord said to Joshua, Yahushua, same, dare I say, angel of the Lord. They gave the Torah to Moshe on Mount Sinai and wrestled with Jacob and met Joshua on the road in the promised land and called in Orthodox Christianity, these are referred to as Christophanies. This is the personage of Christ Yah made flesh prior to the gospel period in the beginning of the New Testament, where we see the personage of the Most High as Messiah, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And there are myriad, dozens if not hundreds of what are called Christophanies, the personage of the Most High as Messiah before we know him as Messiah. And if that's challenging to you, read John chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt amongst men. And biblically, in the Gospels, not for the first time. So Yah has been doing this with his people, interacting with them for as long as we have recorded time in the Bible. And the messenger of Yahweh witnessed to Joshua, saying, thus said Yahweh of hosts. Now again, this priest, Joshua in the Second Temple period, but also Yeshua, the high priest, in the third end times temple period, and then the millennial reign, and then eternity. If you walk in my ways, now this is a big deal, and if you guard my duty, then you shall also rule my house. Now the house of Yahweh is the temple, as Yahushua, the high priest here, in context of Zechariah 520 BC, going into the rebuilding of the first temple into the second temple period. That house is the temple. But also you have the house of Yahweh. How big is the house? Well, the house of Abraham had at least 318 armed retainers when they went into the valley of Siddim to retrieve Lot after Lot was abducted. The house of Judah, hundreds of thousands, millions of people. The house of Israel today, millions if not billions of people. So how big is a house? So in terms of Messiah, if you walk in my ways, which are what? The Torah, the Word, and the Word made flesh. And if you guard my duty, the Torah, this all harkens back to Solomon and the dedication of the first temple. If you are diligently walk in my ways and obey my voice, then none from the root of Jesse, the throne of David, shall depart from being king of Israel. So it's required of the king to keep Torah. It's required of the high priest to keep Torah biblically. And there's huge implications there for Messiah, because the Great Commission is, therefore go forth and make believers out of all nations. Well, believers in what? Believers in a lawless Messiah that nailed the law to the stake because of a bad interpretation of Colossians chapter 2? Or the same set of rules that we've had forever, that's for all people? You can literally read in the Torah, there is one Torah for the Israelite and the sojourner within their gates, which goes back to 2, verse 11, and many nations shall be joined to Yahweh in that day. Well, unequal weights and measures are an abomination to the Most High. Read Proverbs. So it's the same rules for everybody. And Malachi 3 verse 6, and the Lord Yahweh Sabaoth changed not. So the rules didn't change. So the priest and the king, no king but Jesus, amen. The king has to keep Torah. Jesus is the high priest, amen. The high priest has to keep Torah. Thus said Yahweh of hosts, if you walk in my ways, and if you guard my duty, then you shall also rule my house, and also guard my courts. And I shall give you access among these standing here, these angels in the realms of the heavenlies, with Messiah, in the presence of Messiah. And I shall give you access among these standing here. And we could take this layer of the onion even deeper. Every man within the sound of my voice is the priest of his home. So if you are righteous, Luke 1 verse 6, blamelessly walking in the commands of Elohim, I would submit you have access to the heavenlies. I shall give you access among these standing here. Shaul of Tarsus said, do you not know you yourself shall judge angels? Huh? What? We're getting a little esoteric here, Pastor Bear. Maybe simmer down. I know, but there are levels to this game. There are layers to this onion, and it just keeps. This is why you can midrash 3.5 verses for 2 hours. Because there are layers to this game. Now listen, Yahushua, the high priest Joshua, you and your companions who sit before you, for they are men of symbol. You and your companions, you and your apostles, they are men of symbol. Okay. For look, I am bringing forth my servant, capitalized, the branch. The branch of what? Of the root of Jesse, Yishai, the father of David. Messiah's in the line of David. Has to be. Which is why Matthew chapter 1 is a genealogy of Messiah, which proves his connection to King David in order for him to be the biblically prophesied Messiah of the Old Testament, fulfilled, embodied Plerau in the New Testament. For look, I am bringing forth my servant, the branch, Yeshua. John 15 verse 5, I am the vine and you are the branches, says Messiah. See the stone which I have put before Yahushua, Joshua. On the stone are 7 eyes. Eyes are wisdom, and their pathways to wisdom. See, I am engraving its inscription, declares Yahweh of hosts. Yahweh's engraving the wisdom of Joshua the high priest. Just like the Torah, when it was first written, was written with the finger of Elohim. That's why, part of why Colossians chapter 2 is taken out of context. Because it says what was written by hand against us. Well, the Torah was never written by hand. Doctrines and dogmas were written by hand, by men's hands. That's what was nailed to the stake. The Torah is forever. The Torah, the rules, and don't hyperfixate on the Torah. There's lots of people who will elevate the authority of Torah above the authority of Messiah. Well, you can't do that because the Torah is the Word and Messiah is the Word made flesh. So the rule book Like, the user manual for your vehicle that's in the glove box of the vehicle is less important, go with me here, than the vehicle. You should have the user manual. You should be familiar with it. But if you sit in your vehicle in the driveway and never turn it on and just sit in the vehicle and read the user manual, you're not using the vehicle for what it was made for. You're not traveling. You're not commuting. You're not moving. And we need to have a faith that moves. Behold, I come swiftly to reward each man according to his works. Is that a good car? I don't know. I've never driven it. What do you mean you never drive? I just sit in the parking lot and read the user manual. What? Why even have it then? Okay. So the Torah is very important, but it's not more important than Messiah. But even then, the Torah was written by the finger of Elohim. And now, see the stone which I have put before Joshua. On one stone, chief cornerstone, perhaps, are 7 eyes, wisdom. See, I am Yahweh, engraving its inscription, declares Yahweh of hosts. And I shall remove the guilt of the land in one day. Yahweh removes the guilt of the land in one day. What was that day? Probably April 3rd, 33 AD, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when Yeshua said, "It is finished." Not, I would submit, the Constitution of the nation-state of Israel in 1948 via the Balfour Declaration. What is this, a nation born in a day? That's not what we're talking about here. I shall remove the guilt of that land in one day. Well, near-term prophetic, we have, in the time of Zechariah, Joshua the high priest, who's now ordained literally by God to do what? To serve in a temple. To do what? To make sin offerings and guilt offerings. Which do what? Remove the guilt of the people in one day. If you read Leviticus, there's a process for this, for atoning for the sins of the entire people group. That can be done. It was done prior to Joshua the high priest's time in the first temple period, and prior to that in the wilderness at the tabernacle by Aaron. Okay, so there's already a mechanism for this. But then, long-term prophetic, and I shall remove the guilt of that land in one day. Okay, well, in the time of Messiah, again, probably April 3rd, 33 AD at 3 p.m., it is finished, and the guilt of the land was removed by the atoning sacrifice of Yeshua HaMashiach. Let's go long-term prophetic, end times. The guilt of the land, judgment, behold, I come swiftly to reward each man according to his works. The guilt of the land will be removed in one day. Babylon has fallen in 1 hour. Yeah. In that day, declares Yahweh of hosts, you shall invite one another under the vine and under the fig tree. Well, in that day, so vine and figs, right? We got grapes and fruit. Yummy. Hey man, let's have a picnic. We're going to rejoice, right? And so there's the blessing and provision of the vine and the fig tree, but both the vine and the fig tree have biblical symbology. So the vine is grapes, which is covenants. The blood of the grapes, the wine. Take, drink, this is my blood. Do this in remembrance of me. Right? There is no covenant without blood. You shall invite one another under the vine, covenants, and under the fig tree. Fig trees are always indicative of prophecy, the fulfillment of prophecy. And you shall invite one another in that day, declares Yahweh of hosts, under the fulfillment of covenants and the fruition of prophecy. Super cool. Zechariah chapter 2 and 3. I appreciate y'all very much, and I hope you have a blessed day. Shalom.